Hi everyone, my name is Elaine, and today I'm going to be both summarizing and reviewing the third novel in Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, Equal Rites. I'm going to start off with the summary. At first, the Discworld is reintroduced, and then a wizard walks through a thunderstorm on the Ramtop Mountains. The wizard, Drumbillet, arrives in the village of Badass and speaks to the blacksmith. The blacksmith is the 8th son of his family, and he is about to have his 8th son, a wizard in the family. Billet explained that the magic guided him to the smith and will take care of everything. The smith's baby is brought outside. The wizard passes on his magic to the child before the moment of his death, despite the protests of the midwife. Surprise! The child is a girl. The Discworld's first female wizard has been born. Death takes Billet away. There's nothing Billet can do about the female wizard situation. At least, Death reminds him, he gave the baby his staff. The midwife was Granny Weatherwax, a witch. She instructs the smith to burn the staff because wizard magic is the wrong type for a girl and the whole episode should be forgotten. But they can't move the staff. Granny tries to cut the staff in half with an axe, but the head flies off and nearly kills the smith. The smith suggests they just leave it, pile some stuff around the staff so no one will notice. Granny reluctantly agrees until she can think of a better idea. Nothing much happened for 7 years, except that one of the apple trees in the smithy orchard grew perceptibly taller than the others and was frequently climbed by a small girl with brown hair, a gap in her front teeth, and the sort of features that promised to become, if not beautiful, then at least attractively interesting. She was named Escarina, for no particular reason other than her mother liked the sound of the word, and although Granny Weatherwax kept a careful watch on her, she failed to spot any signs of magic whatsoever. It was true that the girl spent more time climbing trees and running around shouting than little girls normally did, but a girl with 4 older brothers still at home can be excused a lot of things. In fact, the witch began to relax and started to think the magic had not taken hold after all. But magic has a habit of lying low, like a rake in the grass. That's on page 15. Esk upsets her father. He hits her. The staff hits him when he walks into the forge. He claims that he simply hit his head. Esk goes to her tree. Her mother sends her youngest sons, Gulta and Cern, out in the snow to retrieve her. When they're done, they're supposed to go check on Granny. The siblings travel to the witch's hut. Esk thinks about how magic requires balance on the way. When they arrive, the siblings find that the cottage looks deserted. They go inside and find Granny lying on her bed. They think she's dead. The boys go to get help while Esk stays with the body. Esk keeps seeing and hearing a crow trying to get into the cottage. It frightens her so much that she runs away. The crow makes it into the house through the chimney before making its way upstairs. A wolf creeps out of the shadows and toward Esk while she's on her way home. Granny wakes up in her bed, her time borrowing the crow's mind complete. Granny heads out into the snow after Esk. Granny can sense the wolves. The staff rescues Esk from the wolves. Granny finds Esk curled up inside herself in a circle of flattened snow. Esk spends the night with Granny. She wonders why Granny can't use magic to light a fire. Esk falls asleep. Granny can sense something lurking in the child's mind. To confirm her suspicions, Granny borrows the mind of an owl and visits Esk's tree. It's the reincarnated wizard, Drum. They argue about Esk and her magic. Granny doesn't want Esk learning wizard's magic because it's the wrong sort for a woman. The wizard tree doesn't see the problem and thinks Granny should train her, send Esk to the university. Granny refuses. There will be no female wizards on her watch. Granny returns home and finds Esk's staff. She tries to destroy it in the fire. Esk starts screaming. Granny comforts her and returns to the staff. It remains unscathed. Granny hides the staff before Esk wakes and asks if she wants to learn magic, a witch's magic. Esk fears her father won't let her. Granny agrees to talk to him. Granny speaks to the smith. She explains that Esk needs to learn how to control the magic or others will come to control her. The smith reluctantly agrees to let Granny give his daughter lessons on how to be a witch. Esk begins her lessons and soon grows impatient. She wants to learn what she deems real magic, aka wizard magic. After several months in her care, Granny reluctantly teaches Esk how to borrow. They practice on a gray eagle. Esk runs away with the bird, taking over its mind completely. Granny must carry her body home. Esk doesn't return that night and begins to lose herself in the eagle. Granny sends her bees out to look for Esk. They can't find her. Granny takes the staff out of its hiding place and rides it to Esk since it knows where to find her. She doesn't enjoy the ride. Upon finding the eagle, Granny traps it in a petticoat and rides the staff back to her cottage. Granny borrows some of the staff's magic to return Esk to her body. Granny sets the eagle free. Esk awakens. Granny comforts her and explains what happened. Esk had become an eagle and learned a valuable lesson. Esk describes seeing creatures sitting around in the dark while an eagle. It unnerves Granny, who sends her outside to feed and thank the eagle. When Esk returns, Granny reluctantly gives her the staff and tells the tale of the day she was born. Upon Granny's demand, Esk conjures fire, damaging many of Granny's belongings, including her kettle. Knowing that she can't teach her and that Esk needs to gain control of her magic, Granny decides to send Esk to a wizard school. Granny writes a letter to the head wizard. Granny talks to Esk's parents about their daughter. Esk turns Gulta into a pig because he doesn't believe she can do magic. Granny forces Esk to turn him back. Granny and Esk begin the long journey to Unseen University. After turning all of their cheap beer into an expensive peach brandy, Esk is given a room at the Fiddler's Riddle by Mr. and Mrs. Skiller. They try to steal her staff in the middle of the night, but it turns into a snake and she takes it back before climbing out the window and into the night. Mrs. Skiller is upset her husband won't be a wizard. The peach brandy turns into something nasty the following day. Esk falls asleep on a barge covered in wool. It is moored at Uhulin's tiny river docks. Esk awakens to find the barge moving. Its owner invites her to breakfast. Granny finds out that Esk is no longer in town from the dockmaster. Granny and her friend Hilda, whom she had reunited with upon arriving in Uhulin, look for Esk in Hilda's crystal ball. They see her floating on the barge farther down the river, surrounded by magic condensing out of the air. Granny decides to go after her. On foot, it looks like the staff is taking over. Esk's host is Amshat Balzoon. He agrees to take Esk with him and his family as long as she proves to be helpful. Esk accompanies the Zuns on their great trading journey down the Ink. She notices the magic getting out of control. Her chores keep doing themselves, for example, and does her best to hide it. Her magic also helps her keep Amshat from being cheated during a trade. She recognizes Spurkles disguised as Ultramarines and makes sure the Zun knows about it. Esk knows she can't go back to the Zuns. She'll be watched and fears the staff will be taken away. She calls her staff and disguises it as a broom so it'll be easier to get around. Esk arrives in Zemfish. She asks directions to Ankh-Morpork and is stopped before she gets very far. There are bandits and scary things on the road. Oh my! Granny gets stuck in a bear trap laid by dwarves, with a bear. When the dwarves arrive at the trap, she asks if they can fix magic broomsticks. She had borrowed Hilda's for the journey to Ankh-Morpork. The dwarves get Granny out. One of them agrees to repair the broom. Esk runs away from her caravan when its wizard Treadle and his apprentice Simon tell her that they don't believe women can be wizards. She resolves to be a witch and a wizard too. She has a nightmare about a black castle who slams its door in her face. None of her magic can get her inside. She hears sniggering. It's the worst sound she has ever heard. Granny finds Esk. They discuss her dream and fears of being unable to enter the university. The girl is surrounded by scorched earth. The magic inside her is trying to find an escape. The two magical forms inside of Esk are feeding off of one another. Granny decides to take her to the university for help and training. Esk and Granny arrive in Ankh-Morpork. Granny begins to enjoy it there and offer her services as a witch. She and Esk can't seem to get into the university until Treadle comes and agrees to take her inside. Granny seems to sense something fishy and storms off. Simon passes his entrance exam. Esk announces that she wants to be a wizard. She's told she can't be because she's a girl. Arch-Chancellor Katangle, Archmage of the Wizards of the Silver Star, doubts she can do wizard magic. She intends to prove that she can. Granny enters the university through the back door. She is led to the head housekeeper, Mrs. Whitlow, who welcomes witches. Granny prepares to read Mrs. Whitlow's tea leaves as she searches for a mind to borrow. She finds the university has a mind of its own. Granny is forced to stop borrowing and read tea leaves. She makes stuff up and adds that Mrs. Whitlow should hire a young maid soon. She has some clothes put aside for her before she runs to find Esk, who emerges from the university gates crying. Esk says she could feel the magic, but it wouldn't work. Everyone laughed at her. Granny tries to comfort her and mentions that she knows another way into the school. Mrs. Whitlow tells Granny what a delight Esk is to have on her staff over tea. Granny reads the leaves for her again. Esk doesn't really like her new job. She's upset she's not learning any wizardry. She notices more of the shadow creatures lurking about. Esk decides that she wants to learn how to read, since it seems to be the key to wizard magic. Esk asks Mrs. Whitlow if she can clean the library. She's given permission and tries to find a good book to use to learn how to read. Simon spots her. She spots the shadow creatures. The books begin to go crazy, try to escape. Some of them manage. Esk warns Simon that they're trying to get in. Simon can't see the great creatures. The critical mass continues to build up, and the books fight one another. The staff twists and hits Simon. He falls unconscious. The chaos dies down as Esk is pulled away by the head librarian. Simon is taken to the infirmary. Esk knows that the staff tried to kill Simon. It has been 3 days and Simon hasn't awoken. Esk brings Granny to see him. Granny announces that nobody's home. He's out wandering. Esk explains that she threw the staff in the river for trying to kill Simon. Granny explains it's because he was summoning the things. It saved her. Esk doesn't believe her. Granny knows she has lost her. Granny explains that magic attracts attention, that of things from the dungeon dimension, the shadow creatures. They long to steal both people's life and their shape, and got Simon when he was unconscious and defenseless. They march into the Great Hall, which is forbidden to women, to speak to Katangle about getting Simon back. He is outraged by their presence. Katangle and Granny get into a magical battle. Esk tries to warn them that the things are coming, tries to get to Granny, but can't get through the magic. Esk runs to the infirmary. The door is locked, and some wizarding students claim something is inside, something she knows wants to burrow into the boy's body. She slips into the university's mind and makes her way inside the infirmary. When the wizards look inside, they find Simon sleeping and Esk silent and cold on the floor, breathing very slowly, and the floor was covered with a fine layer of silver sand. That's on 212. Esk falls into a dreamlike state. She notices Simon sitting in the center of a circle of shadow creatures. Esk takes the pyramid of the world from Simon and runs. She is pursued by a thing and forced to fight back. She begins beating up some of the other things. The thing that took over Simon comes after her. It wants the pyramid of the disc back. Esk doesn't think it can take it from her. She thinks it needs to be given. Esk fights the Simon thing. The things begin to torture Simon, who has been allowed to come back through the thing. He tells her to run, escape with the idea of the world he created, the pyramid she holds, but she cannot watch him in pain, watch him be killed. So she decides to hand over the pyramid to save him, to trust they won't hurt him if she does what they ask. Katingle and Granny stop fighting. They are taken to the two unconscious children. Granny pulls him aside. They know they're wandering, and Granny doubts the wizards can help. She explains the nature of Esk's birth, and they seem to decide that retrieving her staff would be a good idea. Katingle and Granny go out in a thunderstorm to relocate Esk's staff. Katingle admits he threw out her letters. He thought they were a joke. Granny and Katingle finally locate and retrieve the staff. Granny scolds it for not being of much use lately, and promises to torture it if anything happens to Esk. Katingle and Granny make it back to the university on her borrowed broom. Granny and Katingle make their way to the library where the children are being kept. They are brought to them. Katingle wants to give Simon the staff. Granny replies, "Over my dead body," on page 250. She doesn't want to give the things more power. Katingle lays the staff on Esk. Granny realizes Esk can't use the staff. The staff uses itself, or it uses her, but she's never been able to use it, on 251. Katingle debates whether or not to make Esk a wizard. Esk realizes that the things are sort of reflections of us. You can't beat your reflections, they'll always be as strong as you are. That's why they draw nearer to you when you start to use magic. And they don't get tired. They feed off magic, so you can't beat them with magic. No, the thing is, well, not using magic because you can't, that's no use at all. But not using magic because you can, that really upsets them. They hate the idea. If people stopped using magic, they die. That's in 254. This realization allows her to overcome them. Esk and Simon make it back. Esk is made a wizard and given a hat. Her staff seems like nothing more than a stick. Simon's stutter is gone. Katingle considers allowing more girls to study at the university on an experimental basis. He offers Granny a teaching post. She says she'll think about it. Simon and Esk create a new form of magic that people struggle to grasp, but find comforting. And now for my book review. Obviously, the basis for this book is really sexist. Most of its characters are pretty set in their ways, especially when it comes to their modes of thinking. No female wizards. Men have their magic, and females have their lesser magic, their own form of magic. This is the way it has always been argument. It kind of reminds me of traditional gender role discussions with the old wizard Drum, basically being the only one who is forward-thinking for the vast majority of the novel. It bothers me. I get that this is set in a more medieval time, and these are the kind of thoughts that floated around, but it still really bugs me. It's irritating to have to read something like that. I thought that the way magic needled its way into Esk's life was interesting. How she had a special tree she was drawn to, the reincarnated wizard who gave her power, the thoughts she had on magic and how it works, how they just pop into her head. For example, she tells her brothers, "I don't think magic works like that. You can't just make things happen. There's a sort of, like a seesaw thing. If you push one end down, the other end goes up. Every time something happens, something else has to happen too, only in the opposite direction." That's on page 20. Basically, the magic drove her to discover it and become a wizard, and I found that concept very interesting. That, it just made its way into her life when Granny tried so hard and her family tried so hard, or at least the people that knew, to keep it out of her life. And basically all of society, because they didn't want her to become a wizard, because it was the wrong type of magic. I actually really like Granny as a character. I appreciate her confidence and ability to stare, or glare, anything to submission, but this book made me kind of dislike her. She spends most of it being stubborn and closed-minded. It bugs me, but it also makes her realistic. She's afraid of change, afraid to leave badass, who isn't afraid of leaving home in the place they grew up, afraid of heights and traveling by broom, just afraid and surrounded by new events and ideas she isn't sure how to cope with. But she gradually learns to cope and her fears start to dwindle, and she begins to adopt new ideas and change, which is also realistic and great character growth and development. I felt like this novel was less spontaneous than the first two. The story seemed to have a logical progression as though Pratchett had planned it out more. The first two made me feel like Pratchett would think, "Whoops, how do I get Rincewind out of this mess? Dryads, that's the ticket." Actually, not dryads. Magic! And so on and so forth. I found the ending of Equal Rites to be kind of trippy and confusing, and it also seemed to drag on and on. I think it would have been better if it was just a tad shorter. And I also didn't feel as though this novel was as funny as some of the other Discworld novels that come later, but it definitely had its moments. Overall, I gave it a 3 out of 5 star rating. I think it's a decent read, a good read, but it's definitely not my favorite Discworld novel and not my favorite book overall. So there you have it. That is my summary and review of Terry Pratchett's third Discworld novel, Equal Rites. If you like what you saw here today, please give me a thumbs up. I love those. Leave a comment down below to say if you found this helpful or what your favorite Discworld novel is. Do you agree with what I had to say about this one? Let me know. I love finding out what you guys think. And of course, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you know what's up, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.